Morning, everyone. This is a topic that Stefan and I love to talk about a lot. I think it's super interesting. Many of my friends in the bot ecosystem tell me it's a little too futuristic, if you will, and I hope to convince you. This is really important, and it's here now. And let me know at the end how I did, and you hopefully you guys see why this is important. So I'm going to talk about sort of bot-to-bot communication or interbot communication, if you will. And I think it's at least in this crowd, it's kind of obvious, right? There's a ton of bots. Certainly, it's sort of the rise of the bot phenomena. Now, the hype cycle may have sort of grown and subsided and so on, but as developers, as practitioners, as brands, and so on, we are seeing more and more companies, more and more developers. Of course, the approval cycles, budgeting cycles, and so on take time, but I think there's certainly a massive breadth of interest. I think Facebook claims 100,000 plus bots and so on, Alexa assistant. So across text, voice, even web, and so on, continues to grow, right? So there's a sort of it's obvious, you guys get it, and certainly the tools are getting better as well. I think there was a lot of discussion earlier. I heard about structured, unstructured, NLP, all kinds of things. So there's a lot of different things. I'm sure many of the speakers will cover this. And we have just for some context, my company Gupshup, we have a chatbot development platform. So we have a lot of experience working, about 25,000 plus bots built on the platform and so on. We have a lot of these tools, as do other companies as well. So there's a lot of patterns that we observe that sort of lead into what I'm going to talk about, right? So even as that's happening, I think it's gonna, one question many people ask me is, okay, what's the one bot or a few bots that you'd use every day and that you use intensely and actively and so on? And honestly, there aren't that many, right? I mean, there are certainly a few. I think, Pete was talking about Swelly. There's a few in certain segments, like say dating bots and so on. You've had some breakout bots that have gone from a few thousand messages to a few million messages a day, but still few and far apart, right? And I think it's, to be fair, it's early. It's we're working on these things, but quality, as measured by something that engages consumers every day, it becomes a part of your life. We're still sort of further behind, right? And that's because, like I said, it's hard. There's a lot of things that you need to go into, look at, designing the conversational layer, the experience. There's a lot of A/B testing, trial and error, and so on. That's going on, right? So clearly, I get that part, right? But as we think about it, another particular reason why bots are hard is because we're approaching bot development like we did app development, right? Which is every app, for the most part, operated in a silo. Every developer had to build their own app, and they did their own thing, and that's it. Unlike websites, which link to each other, collaborated, if you will, or interoperated, right? So imagine if somebody has built a website and you like their content, and then you're building something on top of it, you just link to it, right? So let's say if you have a vacation package website, you would link to a hotel website and a flight website and so on, and now you have a great website because you're sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. And when that continues ad infinitum, you have a lot more sort of collaborative development happening rather than individual development, right? Where everybody is moving from starting from scratch. In the app world, my travel app doesn't talk to my calendar app to book something. It doesn't talk to my meeting scheduler app, and so on and so forth. Everything just operates independently, and therefore you look at things like discovery is hard, right? App Store discovery versus web search and web discovery, huge problem, right? So there's many, or the cost of app development versus cost of web development, right? What it takes to have good websites, or even the number of apps versus websites, and so on. So and I think to me the core of it, the heart of it is the fact that we take it for granted today, but hyperlink when it came out was just sort of a massive innovation, right? I mean, it's sort of hugely disruptive. The fact that any content could link to any other content elsewhere, which means people can build on others, was very, very powerful. So that then begs the question, what kind of future do we want for bots? Do we want every bot to operate in a silo independently. Every developer doing NLP, doing IATN, adding, just sort of all the building blocks all over again, and none of them talk to each other? Or is there a different kind of vision for the future where bots can talk to each other, collaborate, do interesting things, and then everybody rises collectively, right? Because you leverage. So even when you think about intelligence, is it about individual intelligence or collective intelligence? Even if you think about humans, we are not a whole bunch of Einsteins, right? But we are people that come together to create these giant organizations that can do amazing things, right? So if you could have bots talking to each other, then each bot could perhaps be a specialist, and for things that it doesn't know, it goes, asks another bot, gets the answer, comes back. But now, together, every bot is much more intelligent than each one is by itself, right? So that kind of begs this question, right? What if, right? What if bots could talk to each other? Suddenly, right? You could have a whole range of possibilities, right? You could have bots that are collaborating with each other, or negotiating, or transacting, or competing. Bots that could even upgrade themselves or compose themselves. And I'm going to go into each one of these in a little more detail. But it just opens up a whole lot of possibilities that we couldn't, that are not yet possible, right? Now, let me just pause here for a second. And like I was saying, a lot of my friends would say this is really, futuristic, too far out. We barely have even good bots. Like I was saying earlier, everybody's building V1 of a bot. This is still like a few months to a few years away, right? So let me just do a quick poll here. How many of you have used any sort of interbot communication? Right? Just barely a handful of hands. So even in this sort of advanced practitioner crowd, most of you think you never have, and I'd argue that almost every one of you has, right? If any of you has used Alexa or Google Home or something, right? Alexa itself is a bot, and when you ask it to connect to some other service, they call it a skill, but it's really just another chatbot, right? And we built the VentureBeat bot, which is published to Google Assistant and Alexa and so on. That's a standalone bot by itself. On Facebook, it would be a direct user-to-bot interaction. But when you go through one of these super bots, you're really just connecting one bot, which then talks to another, because Alexa knows it's not possibly going to know everything, right? It's not going to know your bank balance at Citibank, for example, or it's not going to know ski conditions in Tahoe, or it's not going to know the railway timetable in Beijing. But if it wants to enable all of that, what does it do? Find some other bot that can give you the answer, connect you to it, and then have, that's it really, right? So in a way, it's happening. It's already here, invisibly so, or in a way that most people don't realize. The only problem with it is that it's a walled garden, right? So Amazon will say, okay, come here and publish your skills to us. And Google Assistant will say the same thing, and Cortana will say the same thing. And then, Facebook Messenger says, publish your bots here, and so on. And Kik would do the same thing, and so on. But each of these is a walled garden, in a way, not unlike AOL did in the early days of the web, right? They said, come and set up your web content here, and we have a lot of traffic, and we'll have everybody talk to each other. And it's a nice, wonderful world, except it's controlled, it's limited. And then when you just sort of completely blow it open, saying, okay, any website anywhere can talk to any other website, can be accessed through any browser, can link to anything else, and therefore you can then, that also means that you can crawl, index, rank, and search and discover. You can figure out from all those linkages as to which sites are better than others. And the quality of each site is better because as everybody works on their respective node in the graph, it sort of, the whole site, the whole web gets better. Make sense? Yeah? So I think that's the idea, right? It's sort of, so it's already happening. so let's imagine what's possible if we could really just kind of blow it open in an unconstrained way, where any kind of bot could talk to any other bot, right? So just a few sort of examples to illustrate. And by the way, if I could, I'd have loved to do some demos as well. Right now, I'm just going to talk about it, but offline, I'm happy to show you a lot of these. And when you actually see it, it's really the first time, it's one of those delightful feelings, right? So I'd love to show you as well. But let's say once you have when you have these capabilities, uh, imagine a shopping bot that can talk to a whole bunch of merchant bots to do comparison shopping, right? And not just like static comparison shopping of the kind that you have on the web, but you could possibly even have negotiation, right? You might say, okay, what if I buy 5 of these? Can you give me a discount? Or can you price match this other deal that this other merchant is giving? And because these are bots and bots can have a conversation, go back and forth and so on, these now become possible in a way that you can't do in a static world of web, right? Um, or imagine another scenario where you could have, you know, let's say you could have a few poker bots. I just use that as an example. And then there's a dealer bot, and between them they could play a round of poker where somebody wins, somebody loses, but each one autonomously sort of making decisions and doing things. And you could have millions of games, right? Because they can play out a game in a few seconds. But you take that idea of game theory, uh, you know, everything, a lot of life can be modeled as games, as competitions, and suddenly you have AI bots battling out each other, getting better in the process, doing a whole lot of interesting things, right? Let's say you could have bots that supervise, that manage other bots, right? We've set up some monitoring bots that can track other bots and even fix them, right? Proactively as things emerge and so on. So then yeah, this is a very interesting example, right? As we build a lot of bots, in fact, many large enterprises that we work with, this is particularly relevant, right? Whether inside or outside the organization. So let me take the example of a multinational corporation, right? They usually have different divisions in different geographies operating in different languages. When they start thinking about bots, it's overwhelming. It's practically inconceivable to imagine that there'd be one giant monolithic bot that could handle everything across sort of these set of this huge organization. What's a lot simpler, right? I mean, this is sort of engineering 101, right? When you face a complex problem, you break it down into simpler problems, right? Modular stuff. What's a lot simpler for each of them to do is each division, each team can build out its own bot, and then you keep one sort of super bot, a router at the top, which when a consumer query comes in, it routes it to the appropriate bot that can actually handle it, right? So depending on which geography the customer's from or what the query is about, it gets routed in an appropriate way. So now you can, both technically as well as organizationally, just modularize this whole problem, right? You have different teams building their own respective bots, and then they come together in a very simple way. Now that's within the enterprise, but even outside the enterprise, right? Imagine a hotel concierge bot redirecting to a movie theater bot or a restaurant bot to make a reservation, right? So all of these things, I mean, it's no different like the web example I was giving you. If you have a vacation website, it can connect to a hotel website and a flight website and so on. So all of this aggregation becomes very, very powerful and possible. And when you continue that, over time, it becomes, very, very interesting, right? We can organize these bots into groups and hierarchies, maybe simulate, organizations of the kind that humans have to handle, large, complicated tasks, right? If you want to decentralize computing, but still have some sort of control, it opens up a lot of possibilities, right? Perhaps the most significant thing as bot developers, right, that Interbot will transform is even the very way in which we create new bots, right? Like I was showing in one of the earlier slides today, right? You'll hear a lot of speakers talking about, okay, here's how you do NLP, and here's how you do, structured and unstructured messaging, and here's how you do, languages and hosting and monitoring and so on. Well, what if I told you it's a lot simpler than that, right? You could, for example, just take a NLP bot plus a translate bot plus an NLP bot plus, let's say, a simple pizza bot, and simply by stringing them together, you get a multilingual intelligent pizza bot, right? And possibly you may have created none of them, or maybe just the simple pizza bot, and somebody else built in the e-commerce NLP, somebody else built the translate capability, and you just literally do plug and play, right? In fact, when it becomes that simple, guess what? You could have bots composing other bots, right? Or upgrading themselves. Instead of this translate bot, it points to another one, and now it speaks 10 more languages, right? Instead of this NLP tool, it uses another one, and now it's much smarter, right? Or a bot may notice an arbitrage saying, oh, somebody wants to convert from A to B, and there's another bot that converts from B to C, but if I just combine it, I get an A to C converter, if you will, right? And these sound very abstract and far out, but these happen on Wall Street day after day. And now, as they become commonplace, there's a lot of Main Street possibilities as well in terms of how this can change a lot of things. So, and that's sort of a literal example of composing new bots. I mean, if you've done shell scripting, some of this would be familiar, where you can just say, bot 1 pipes to bot 2 pipes to bot 3. And in this case, it's sort of a sequential workflow where just literally with that command, you create a new bot. Or, and of course, if you have parallel or, you could have parallel workflows, you can have conditional workflows, but, it's like composing circuits, right? I mean, once you sort of lay out these things in a particular manner, you can do very interesting things with it. So, and a consequence of this is, this may give rise to a whole new sort of sub-ecosystem within the broader bot ecosystem, where bots may be created not for human consumption, but to be used by other bots, right? They are sort of utility bots. And in the old days, we'd create libraries. Well, now you just publish it as a bot that would be used by some other bot to compose and offer a consumer-facing service, right? So, so this would sort of, in a way, be another class of bots. It'll never be published on, let's say, Facebook Messenger by itself, or would never show up on Alexa by itself, but would always show up as a part of something, right? Imagine a payment bot, an escrow bot, a reputation, a trust and verification bot. I mean, these are utility tools that everybody needs, but but it's not an end user service, if you will, right? And then sort of the big problem, right? How many times today will you hear about discovery, right? Bot discovery being such a huge problem. Well, think about just like you have the web ecosystem, where there are a few major websites that search engines that crawl, index, and then refer you to another website when you're looking for something. I mean, that's how we deal with the fact that there are a few billion websites and none of us can remember them, but we still use thousands of them without necessarily knowing each one individually, right? So you sort of take the same model and apply it in the bot ecosystem. So I can easily see a super search bot, right, which would crawl, index into bot, would rank them, would even have simulated conversations with each of those bots and sort of rank their responses to figure out which ones are good or not. And so on the front end, they may have their own traffic, but and you're already seeing this, right? But when you break open the walled garden, right? Imagine if Alexa or a Google Assistant or Facebook M or whatever other bots may come up, I mean, that already have consumer traffic, may then connect to this universe of bots. And so long as there exists some bot out there that can give you the answer, it'll provide it to you, right? And in that way, it's actually much better than web search. Search engines today just, give you these referral links, and then you go out there and do something. But in many situations, I don't need to, look at that website. I don't need to interact with that bot. Just give me the answer, right? What's the, what's the ski conditions in Tahoe, or what's the, uh, so in many of these cases, now it depends on whether the other bot gets credit or not, and so on. A lot of these issues are to be resolved. I'll sort of, in the interest of time, I'll skip over it. Um, some purists among you might argue, well, wait a minute, isn't this what APIs do? Why do we need inter-bot communication and so on? Again, sort of a longer discussion, but a few high-level things, right? APIs tend to be unidirectional, they tend to be synchronous, they tend to be very fragile. You miss a parameter and they'll barf and so on. APIs are meant for developers, right? How many of you, if you're not a developer, have used APIs? But with Interbot, I expect it to be, bidirectional, asynchronous, also for regular users. No technical skills required, no specific formatting required either. It could be NLP, it could be plain natural language, and you just sort of, so long as one bot understands another or does the right thing, it sort of works by itself and so on, right? So anyway, we've launched something called Interbot. It's at interbot.cc, and we'd like it to become an open standard. We'd like more developers to use it. We're aggregating a lot of different bots, and already it's connected to tens of thousands of bots, and more on the way soon. But it becomes an open platform, and there are some ideas, along the like say bot neutrality, right, along the lines of net neutrality, where you don't discriminate against bots and people can mix and match and so on. And this whole ecosystem, like I was telling you earlier, so Interbot will have a registry, and then that's about it. But there's opportunities for the developer ecosystem to create, trust and verification bots, reputation and reviews, right? How do I even trust a bot? Or if I make a micropayment to that other bot, what if it doesn't provide the service? And so on, right? Payment and escrow, there's many things that need to be built into the ecosystem. We've literally sort of laid think of this as the lowest layer of a multi-layer stack, and there's a lot to be done here as well. So anyway, I think I'll skip this part in the interest of time, but on the thought I'd like to leave you with is I do believe that Interbot could be as significant a step in bot evolution as moving from hunter-gatherer phase to sort of more organized civilization and society was for humans, because when bots come together, just like when people came together, it just opens up the kind of possibilities that individual bots operating individually in silos will never be possible. So do think it's a big idea. We'll see how long it takes, but it's here. So thank you. I think we have a few more minutes for questions, if any. Yeah.
Authentication, how do we get the authentication layer sorted out? Is it kind of an onion skin approach, or how do we know that one bot can trust the other bot while we're talking while we're hands off?
No, good question. I think I kind of alluded to it, right? Think about web. How did we solve the problem of, can I give my credit card to this website? There was VeriSign, there was Trusty, there was Thoughty, there were services that said, okay, you can trust them, we've verified, we know where they live, we can hold them accountable. So imagine if there's a Trusty bot which says, here's the list of bots that I've verified, and they're not these anonymous, dark bots or something. So somebody has to obviously provide that service, but there's a lot of web analogies that we can leverage, right? Yes, it's a slightly different layer, but we don't need to relearn all the mistakes. I mean, we can leverage all the things we've solved in the past. It's just a different form factor. Right? Yeah. So great. Sure. Right. So I think, look, web search worked one because of linking and page rank and so on. But more than that, then they said meta tags, self descriptions, and then third-party descriptions, and there's of course some gaming going on as well. But that's how sort of SEO evolved, right? Make sure your content is well organized, well indexed, self-descriptive, and so on. So similarly, I can see with bots saying, maybe there's a Swagger-like spec, right? Describe your capabilities. What can you answer and what can you not? And how do you do it? And it's not just what you describe yourself, but maybe the super search bot may query it, right? M might query the bot and let's have a simulated conversation and use reverse NLP, if you will, to say how well did you understand the queries I was asking you, right? And based on that, it can create its own ranking. And then ultimately, of course, it depends on those companies and their capabilities to say our search is better than their search, and so on. But I think it evolves in almost very similar ways. Yeah. Yes. So, well, for starters, we've published APIs and a registry, um, but we realize that there's many layers needed above it, and we want the ecosystem to get involved, to leverage it, to contribute, to build, and take advantage of it as well. So I mean, there's a lot, right? There's also semantic standards, like if my definition of invoice and order is it the same as your definition, and so on and so forth. But even those, we have some ideas where those standards could themselves be bots, right? So imagine I could give a non-compliant set of information to a bot, which then sends me a compliant message, which then I forward it to another bot that understands it, and so on. So we want it to be, you deliberately don't want to lock in any formats and standards, semantic standards at the technical layer. This is just the transport layer to begin with. But anyway, I'm around for through the rest of the day. I think in the interest of time, we should skip. But thank you very much.